The wind howled across the alien marketplace, cold and sharp like knives cutting through cloth. Stalls stood in rows, their owners shouting half-heartedly, trying to sell what little food they had. The air smelled of smoke, damp earth, and hunger. Among the crowd walked a thin alien woman, her head lowered, her arms wrapped tightly around two children. Her eyes were tired, her skin pale, and her steps slow as if the weight of the world pressed on her shoulders. She was a widow, and in her culture, a widow was worth nothing. Her children clung to her cloak. The older one, a boy with wide eyes, held his little sister's hand as if he feared she would disappear if he let go. The girls' lips were blue from the cold. Their bellies had not seen a full meal in weeks, only scraps from neighbors who gave out of pity. Tonight, the mother had come with the last of her coins, hoping to buy bread. She stepped up to a stall where thick loaves rested on a wooden shelf. She offered her coins, her hand trembling, but the shopkeeper's face hardened. "Widow," he spat, "your kind brings no honor. Take your coins and leave. I don't sell to those without a man." Her throat closed. She tried to speak, tried to beg, but her voice broke apart like shattered glass. The children stared at the bread with hungry eyes. The shopkeeper turned away, shouting prices to someone else. Her coins fell from her shaking hand and clinked against the dirt. She bent down quickly, her fingers numb, picking them up before anyone could steal them. Her son whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." She wanted to scream, to cry, to break apart, but she stayed silent. In her world, silence was survival. Her husband had died in the last war. His body never returned, only a medal tossed at her door. From that day, doors closed, voices grew cruel, and her life became an endless chain of suffering. A widow was cursed, they said. A widow was better hidden. And her children, fatherless, were seen as half a life, less than nothing. She pulled them close and walked away from the stall. The boy stumbled on his weak legs, but she lifted him quickly. Every step was harder than the last. Her youngest coughed, her small chest rattling, and the sound tore through the mother's heart like a knife. The cold grew deeper, biting at their skin, wrapping them in misery. She pressed her lips together, trying to stay strong, but inside she was falling apart. As she moved through the crowd, a pair of eyes followed her. A tall figure stood near the shadows of an abandoned stall. He was not from her world. His skin was different, his build heavier, his eyes sharper. A human soldier left behind after the war. Most people avoided him. Some even cursed his presence. But tonight, his gaze stayed fixed on the widow and her children. He saw the trembling of their small hands, the hollow cheeks, the hopeless steps. Something inside him stirred, something that refused to look away. The widow did not see him. She only felt the weight of despair pressing harder with every passing second. She guided her children toward the edge of the market, away from the noise, toward the long road back to their broken shelter. Her little girl tugged on her arm and whispered, "Mama, will we eat tonight?" Her throat closed again. She wanted to lie, to say yes, to promise food and warmth, but her lips stayed sealed. She had no answer. The night deepened. Snowflakes began to fall, slow at first, then heavier. The road home stretched dark and empty. The widow pulled her cloak tighter around her children, but the fabric was thin, full of holes. Her son shivered violently. She rubbed his arms, whispering, "Just a little longer, my child. Just a little longer." Her steps slowed. Her legs shook with weakness. Every breath burned. Still, she pushed forward because mothers cannot stop, even when they are broken. The snow thickened, swallowing the path ahead, and the children's steps dragged as if the earth pulled them down. Then, without warning, the little girl's legs buckled. She fell face first into the snow. The boy cried out and dropped beside her, shaking her small body. The widow screamed her daughter's name, panic ripping through her chest. She pulled the girl into her arms, shaking, trying to wake her. The child's face was pale, her lips dark. "No, no, please, not her!" The widow cried into the night. Tears streamed down her face, freezing on her cheeks. She rocked the small body against her chest, her own heart pounding like thunder. She begged, whispered, shouted, but the little girl did not move. The marketplace noise was far behind them now. The street was empty. The widow was alone in the storm, clutching her child, her son crying beside her. Her body shook with despair, her mind screaming for help. But no one would help. Not here. Not in a world that had already decided she was nothing. Then footsteps echoed through the snow. Heavy, steady, strong. She lifted her head, her tears blurring her sight. A tall figure emerged from the shadows. The human soldier. His coat was dark, his breath visible in the freezing air. His eyes locked on her. For a moment, fear gripped her chest. Humans were dangerous, everyone said. They were wild, unpredictable, brutal. She clutched her children tighter, shielding them. But the human did not draw a weapon. He did not shout. He moved closer, slowly, carefully, as if approaching a fragile bird. His eyes dropped to the little girl in her arms, then back to the widow's face. "Give her to me," he said, his voice calm but firm. The widow froze. Her mind screamed to refuse, to protect, to run. But her arms were weak. Her child was slipping away, and something in the human's eyes, something raw and unshakable, told her he meant no harm. The storm howled around them. The snow covered the road, and time seemed to stop. The widow's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the human, torn between fear and the tiny spark of hope she had buried long ago. And in that frozen silence, her daughter's small body grew colder in her arms. The human soldier bent down and gently lifted the little girl from the widow's arms. His movements were careful, almost tender, as if he held something too fragile to break. The widow's breath caught in her chest. She wanted to grab her child back, to scream, to fight, but her arms trembled with weakness. The human pressed his large hand against the child's chest, listening. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped the girl tightly in it. "Follow me," he said. His voice was deep, firm, but not unkind. The widow hesitated. Her heart raced. Every story she had ever heard about humans rushed into her mind, stories of cruelty, of blood, of betrayal. Yet in this moment, with her daughter slipping away, she saw no cruelty in his eyes. She saw urgency, determination. Her son tugged her cloak, his voice trembling. "Mama, please. She's cold. He will help." The soldier turned and began walking quickly through the snow, carrying the girl in his arms. His steps were strong, cutting through the storm like it was nothing. The widow stumbled behind, clutching her son's hand, her heart beating like a drum. Every moment felt like a choice between fear and survival. The road stretched long and silent, but the soldier did not slow. He carried the child as if she weighed nothing. Finally, they reached the edge of the settlement, where an old human shelter stood, half ruined from the war, yet still holding warmth. He pushed the door open with his shoulder and entered, motioning for the widow to follow. Inside, a dim fire glowed in a stone hearth. The air smelled of wood smoke, warm and heavy. The widow's breath caught in her throat as she stepped in. She had not felt warmth like this in years. Her son clung to her skirt, wide-eyed, while the soldier laid the little girl down on a rough bed of blankets near the fire. He moved quickly. From a metal box, he pulled out a flask, pouring thick liquid into a small cup. He lifted the child's head gently and pressed the cup to her lips. She did not drink at first, her lips too cold, but he rubbed her throat carefully, coaxing her to swallow. A faint sound escaped her chest, a weak cough. The widow gasped, dropping to her knees beside her daughter, clutching her tiny hand. "She lives," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. The soldier only nodded, his face serious. He pulled another blanket over the child and tucked it close around her shoulders. Then he looked at the widow, his eyes steady. "She will need food and rest. Stay here until the storm passes." The widow's body tensed. She looked around the small room, wooden walls, human tools, the faint smell of iron and oil. She should not be here. Her people would never forgive her for stepping inside a human's shelter. Her heart told her to leave, to run. But then her daughter stirred weakly, her lips moving as if whispering in sleep. The widow's chest tightened. She could not risk the child's life for fear of shame. Her son tugged at her sleeve again, whispering, "Mama, I'm hungry." His eyes darted to a loaf of bread sitting on the table. The soldier noticed and tore off a piece, handing it to the boy. The widow's hand shot out, instinctively blocking it. "No," she said quickly, her voice shaking. She didn't trust gifts. Nothing in her life ever came free. The soldier frowned, his brow furrowing, but he did not argue. Instead, he placed the bread on the table and stepped back. "If you want it, take it," he said simply. His tone carried no demand, no trick, just quiet patience. The boy looked up at his mother, his lips trembling. Slowly, she lowered her hand. Her son rushed forward and grabbed the bread, biting into it with desperate hunger. The sound of his chewing filled the silent room. The widow watched him eat. her heart twisting between guilt and relief. The soldier crouched near the fire, adding more wood. The flames grew brighter, filling the room with golden light. For the first time in many nights, the widow's children were warm, safe, and fed. Her hands trembled as she touched her daughter's cheek, feeling life returning slowly to her skin. Her eyes flicked to the soldier. He was sitting quietly now, sharpening a small blade, but his movements were calm, unthreatening. Finally, she found her voice. "Why?" she whispered. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Why what? Why are you helping us? No one helps us, not even our own people." The soldier paused, setting the blade aside. His gaze softened, and for the first time, his lips curved into something almost like a smile. "Because I can," he said. The words struck her like lightning. So simple, yet they shook her to her core. She had begged, cried, and fought for years, but no one had ever said those words. Everyone had reasons to turn her away. Everyone had excuses for cruelty. Yet here stood a stranger, an enemy, even, and he chose to help with no demand in return. She lowered her eyes, struggling with the storm inside her heart. She wanted to mistrust him, to believe this kindness was a trap. But as she looked at her children, the boy eating, the girl breathing softly, she could not deny the truth. Without him, her daughter would already be gone. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling fire and the soft sound of children breathing. The widow's eyes grew heavy, exhaustion dragging at her bones. For the first time in years, she let herself lean back against the wall, her head dropping slightly as sleep pulled at her. Her son curled against her side, warm and full, and her daughter rested safely under the soldier's heavy coat. The soldier sat watch, his eyes sharp, listening to the storm outside. He did not close his eyes, not even for a moment. And though the widow did not yet realize it, that night was the first time in her life that someone had guarded her family not because they were worth something, but simply because they were alive. The storm raged on outside, but inside the small shelter, the widow's children slept without fear. For the first time in years, they were not alone. And the widow, though her heart still trembled with doubt, felt the faint spark of hope flicker in her chest. The morning came slowly, the storm outside still whispering against the walls of the shelter. The widow woke first, her eyes heavy, her body stiff from sleeping against the hard wall. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The warmth confused her. Then she saw her children curled in blankets near the fire, their faces peaceful, their breathing soft. Relief washed through her chest, and tears pricked her eyes. The human soldier was still awake. He sat on a chair by the door, his eyes fixed outside as if waiting for danger. His face was tired, but he had not closed his eyes. The widow stared at him for a moment, uncertain. Why had he stayed awake all night? Why had he guarded them like they were his own family? Her son stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Mama," he whispered, smiling faintly, "I am warm." His words cut into her heart. It had been so long since her child had said such a thing. The little girl coughed weakly, but her color was better now, her skin no longer pale as death. She opened her eyes slowly, whispering in a thin voice, "Mama, I had a dream. There was bread." The widow kissed her daughter's forehead and tried not to cry. The soldier rose to his feet and brought over a small pot he had placed near the fire. Inside was a simple stew of grain and dried meat. He poured it into bowls and set them before the children. The smell filled the room, warm and rich. Her son's eyes widened, and he looked at her for permission. She hesitated, her pride and fear pulling at her, but her daughter's weak cough pushed her to nod. The children began to eat, their hands shaking with hunger. Every bite seemed to bring life back into them. The widow did not touch the food herself. She kept her eyes down, her hands folded tight in her lap. The soldier noticed. "You need to eat too," he said quietly. "I cannot," she whispered. "It is not right for me." His brow furrowed. "Not right?" She swallowed hard. "In my people's eyes, I am already cursed. If they knew I sat in a human shelter, eating human food." Her voice broke. She shook her head. "They will call me worse than a widow. They will say I sold myself." The soldier stared at her, his jaw tightening. Then, without another word, he placed the bowl directly in front of her. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "Your children need you alive, and you cannot care for them if you starve." Her lips trembled. She wanted to refuse, to push the bowl away, but the smell filled her lungs, and her body ached with weakness. Slowly, her fingers reached for the spoon. She took a small bite. Warmth spread through her chest, filling the hollow emptiness inside her. For the first time in so long, she felt strength returning. The children smiled at her, their mouths full. Her son whispered, "Mama is eating too." His voice was light, almost joyful. It was a sound she thought she would never hear again. When the meal was finished, the soldier cleaned the bowls silently. The widow watched him, confusion and fear still swirling in her mind. Why was he doing all this? Why did he not ask for anything in return? In her world, no one gave without taking twice as much back. The day passed quietly. Snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in silence. The soldier repaired small cracks in the shelter, his hands steady and skilled. The children followed him curiously, asking questions in shy voices. He answered them with patience, even showing the boy how to tie a rope and the girl how to fold a blanket tightly. Their laughter filled the small room, awkward at first, then brighter with every moment. The widow sat in the corner, her heart torn in two. She should not trust him. Her people had warned her all her life. Humans are dangerous. Humans are selfish. Humans destroy. And yet this man, this stranger, had done nothing but give. As the evening came, the soldier placed more wood on the fire. Then he looked at the widow and said, "You cannot take your children back out there. Not in this storm, not in their condition. Stay here until they are strong again." Her chest tightened. She shook her head quickly. "No, if the others see us here, they will say I have betrayed my kind. They will cast me out completely. My children will suffer worse." The soldier stepped closer, his voice steady. "They are already suffering. Do you want to carry them back into the cold just to satisfy those who turned their backs on you?" His words cut deep. She lowered her head, silent. He was right, but admitting it felt impossible. The thought of her people's judgment weighed on her like chains. Yet the sight of her children sleeping peacefully by the fire told her the truth she did not want to face. Her son spoke softly, breaking the silence. "Mama, can we stay? Just for a little? It is warm here. I like it." Her daughter, half asleep, mumbled one word, "Papa." The widow's breath caught. She stared at her little girl, her heart shaking. She wanted to deny it, to tell her child she was mistaken, but the word echoed in her mind. Papa. Her daughter had given the human a name he had not claimed, but one he was beginning to earn. The soldier said nothing. His face softened, his eyes lowering, but he did not smile. He simply turned and adjusted the blankets around the child, careful, gentle. The widow watched, her chest burning with emotions she could not control. Fear, shame, confusion, and beneath it all, a spark of something dangerous, hope. That night, when the children were asleep, she sat across the fire from the soldier. The flames danced between them, shadows flickering across his face. Her voice was low, almost broken. "I don't understand you. Why do you do this? Why us?" He looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "Because no one else will, and because they deserve a chance." His eyes flicked to the children, then back to her. "You all do." Her throat tightened. She turned her face away, unable to look at him any longer. His words were too heavy, too dangerous. If she let them sink in, she might believe them, and believing would change everything. She closed her eyes, the fire's warmth on her skin, her children's breathing steady in the silence. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of her endless struggle lift slightly. She had not chosen this path. She had not asked for it. But now, standing at the edge of fear and hope, she knew the truth. The human had already begun to change their lives. The snowstorm ended after 3 days, leaving the village covered in a thick, white blanket. Smoke rose from chimneys, people came back into the market, and life returned with its usual cruelty. The widow wrapped her children in their thin cloaks and prepared to leave the human's shelter. Her heart was heavy. She owed him everything, yet the eyes of her people were sharper than knives. If they saw her walking out of a human's home, whispers would turn into stones. The soldier stood by the door, watching her tie the girl's cloak. "You don't have to leave," he said. His voice was steady, calm, but not demanding. She shook her head. "I must. If they see us here, they will never forgive me. My children will suffer for my shame." The soldier's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He only opened the door and let the cold air rush in. The widow took her children's hands and stepped outside. For a moment, she glanced back. He stood there, tall and silent, like a shadow carved into the doorway. She almost said thank you, but the words never left her lips. The village was alive with noise. People filled the market, trading food and goods. As the widow walked through the crowd, pulling her children close, voices rose around her. "Look," someone whispered. "The widow came from the human's house." "She has shamed herself," another said. "She lets her children eat with him like they are his own. She's not fit to be part of us anymore." The widow lowered her head, her cheeks burning. The children clung tighter to her cloak. She tried to walk faster, but the whispers followed her like poison. Her son's eyes filled with tears. He did not understand the words, but he understood the hate. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's side, hiding from the stares. One man stepped forward, blocking her path. He was broad-shouldered, his voice loud. "Widow," he spat, "you shame us all. First you lose your husband, then you crawl to a human for protection. What are you now, his slave?" The crowd laughed cruelly. The widow's hands shook. She wanted to reply, to shout, but fear closed her throat. The man sneered and moved closer. "You and your cursed children should leave this place. We don't need your kind here." Before she could move, a strong hand caught the man's arm. The crowd fell silent. The human soldier stood there, his grip like iron, his eyes blazing. He pulled the man back with ease, his voice sharp. "You dare insult her in front of her children? You dare call them cursed while you stand here doing nothing for them?" The man's face turned red. "This is none of your business, human. These are our laws, our people." The soldier stepped forward, his presence towering. "If your laws mean letting children starve in the snow, then your laws are worthless. If your people mean turning their backs on the weak, then your people are cowards." The crowd gasped. No one ever spoke against the village in such words. The widow's heart pounded in her chest. The soldier's voice carried power, sharp and unshaken. He turned to the crowd, pointing at the children. "Tell me, what crime have they committed? What have they done to deserve this? You let them freeze, you let them starve, and you call yourselves honorable? Shame on you." Murmurs filled the air. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others scowled with anger. The man he had pushed back snarled, his hand reaching for a blade at his belt. But the soldier's glare froze him where he stood. "If helping them is a crime," the soldier said, his voice like thunder, "then punish me. But do not touch them." The silence that followed was heavy. The widow's chest rose and fell quickly, her eyes wide. Her children clung to her, trembling, but their eyes shone with something new, safety. For the first time, they saw someone standing for them, not against them. The man spat on the ground, his pride wounded. He turned and stormed away, muttering curses. The crowd broke apart slowly, some whispering, some shaking their heads, but none dared step forward again. The soldier turned to the widow. His eyes softened, though his voice remained firm. "You don't have to face them alone, not anymore." Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him how much his words meant. But her heart was tangled in fear and shame. She could only lower her eyes and whisper, "You should not have done that. Now they will hate you too." He shrugged, almost as if it meant nothing. "Let them. I've been hated before. But you and your children," his gaze dropped to the little ones, "you deserve better." Her son tugged at her sleeve, whispering softly, "Mama, he saved us again." The girl looked up at the soldier with wide eyes, whispering that word again, the word that made the widow's heart ache, "Papa." The widow turned away quickly, hiding her face. She could not let them see her tears. But deep inside, something was changing. The wall she had built around her heart for years was beginning to crack. And though she tried to fight it, she could feel hope slipping through. That night, when she sat alone in her broken shelter, her children already asleep beside her, she remembered the soldier's words. "If helping them is a crime, then punish me." Those words echoed in her chest like fire. No one had ever spoken for her before. No one had ever risked shame for her children. And though the world outside still hated her, she knew one truth she could not deny. Her children were safer with the human than with anyone else. And maybe, just maybe, her heart was too. The days passed slowly after the market incident, but something had changed inside the widow. She tried to keep her distance from the human, tried to hold on to the walls she had built around her heart, but every time she looked at her children, those walls cracked more and more. Her son laughed now, not often, but enough to remind her of the boy he used to be. Her daughter smiled in her sleep, safe and warm, instead of shivering and coughing. These small changes were because of him, the human who gave without asking, who protected without demanding. Yet the widow could not quiet the storm in her chest. She had spent years hearing that humans were cruel, selfish, untrustworthy. Even her late husband had warned her to never accept help from outsiders. But what had her people given her since his death? Only shame, hunger, and rejection. What had the human given? Bread, fire, protection, and something far more dangerous: hope. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she sat near her shelter's broken window, watching her children play outside. They were tossing small stones, laughing at the sound when the rocks clinked together. The human soldier stood nearby, silent but watchful, making sure no one bothered them. The sight twisted something inside her. She remembered how her husband had once stood in the same way, guarding them with pride. For a moment, it felt as though the human had stepped into a place she thought would forever remain empty. Her son ran up to the soldier and tugged on his sleeve. "Show me again," he asked eagerly. The soldier bent down, showing him how to tie a knot with a piece of rope. The boy's face lit up with excitement. The widow watched, her throat tight. She should have stopped it. She should have told her son not to bother him. But she couldn't. Watching them together filled her with a warmth she had not felt in years. Later that night, when the children were asleep, the widow sat near the fire with the soldier. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. The firelight danced on his face, showing the scars he carried, proof of battles he had survived. She wondered what his story was, what had brought him here, why he had not left. At last she spoke, her voice trembling. "Why would you choose us?" she asked. "We are nothing, broken, unwanted. Why us?" The soldier looked into the flames for a long time before answering. "Because no one is unwanted," he said simply. The words struck her heart like an arrow. She had lived so long believing she was worthless, that her children were burdens. Yet here was a man from another world, telling her the exact opposite. She turned her face away quickly, afraid he might see the tears in her eyes. The next day, the village women passed her on the road, whispering loudly enough for her to hear. "She walks with the human now. She is shameless." Another laughed. "Her children call him father. I heard it myself." The widow's cheeks burned with humiliation, but when she looked at her children, she saw no shame in their eyes, only joy. Her daughter clung to the human's hand, smiling, and her son ran ahead, calling out for him to watch. The world might spit on them, but her children no longer looked broken. That night, as they shared another meal together, the widow's heart fought a war inside her chest. She watched the way the soldier passed food to her children first, how he never touched his own plate until they had eaten. She saw the way he listened when her son spoke, treating his words like they mattered. She noticed the gentle way he wrapped the girl in a blanket, careful not to wake her. It was in those small things that her heart began to surrender. Still, she fought against it. Fear whispered inside her head. What if this was only temporary? What if he left one day? Like everyone else? Could she risk opening her heart again, only for it to be crushed? She turned her face away, hiding her tears. But even as she tried to resist, a small voice inside her kept whispering, "He is different." Later, when the fire burned low, the soldier noticed her silence. "You are troubled," he said. She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I do not understand you. You give and give, but you ask for nothing. I am afraid. I am afraid of what it means." He studied her for a moment, then spoke softly. "It means nothing except that I will not turn my back on you. Not now, not ever." Her breath caught in her throat. His words were dangerous, too dangerous. She wanted to push him away, but her heart no longer listened. Her son, half asleep, murmured softly, "Papa, don't leave us." The widow froze, her eyes wide. Her daughter, curled against the soldier's coat, whispered the same word in her dreams. "Papa." The soldier said nothing. His face softened, but he did not claim the title. Still, he did not push it away either. He simply rested a hand on the child's hair, keeping silent watch. The widow turned her face toward the fire, tears sliding down her cheeks. Her children had already chosen him. And deep inside, though she would not admit it even to herself, so had she. The battle in her heart was not over, but the truth was growing clearer each day. The human was no longer just a stranger. He was becoming something far greater. And though fear clawed at her, though her people's hatred surrounded her, she could not deny what her heart already knew. Her family was no longer broken, not as long as he stood with them. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. The widow sat inside her small shelter, her children curled close beside her. For a moment there was peace. The fire crackled softly, and the soldier sat near the door, sharpening his blade in silence. But deep in the distance, faint sounds carried through the air, shouts, screams, the clash of metal. The widow's heart froze. She knew those sounds too well. Raiders. Her son stirred, his eyes wide with fear. "Mama, what is that?" he whispered. Before she could answer, the soldier rose to his feet. His eyes narrowed, sharp as a hawk's. He listened carefully, then spoke in a low, firm tone. "Stay inside. Do not open the door for anyone but me." The widow's breath caught. "Raiders? Here?" He nodded once. "They are coming." The children clung to their mother, trembling. The widow's chest tightened with terror. She remembered the last raid when her husband had gone out to fight and never returned. The memory burned her heart like fire. She grabbed the soldier's arm. "Please, don't go. They'll kill you too." But he only placed a steady hand over hers, his eyes calm but unyielding. "I promised I would not turn my back on you. I will not let them touch your children." Before she could reply, he stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The widow's heart raced. She pressed her children against her chest, whispering prayers she was no longer sure anyone listened to. Outside, the sound of boots grew louder. Shouts filled the night. Then came the roar of fire as raiders set torches to houses, their laughter echoing like demons in the dark. Through a crack in the wall, the widow saw them, dozens of men with weapons, dragging villagers into the street. Some fought back, but most were beaten down quickly. Her hands shook. She wanted to scream, to run, but fear paralyzed her. Only her children's soft sobs reminded her to breathe. Then she saw him, the soldier. He stood in the open street, blade in hand, facing the raiders without fear. His figure was tall against the firelight, his eyes burning like steel. The raiders laughed at him. "A human?" one jeered. "This is what guards them now?" Another spat. "Kill him and burn the rest." The widow's heart nearly stopped as the raiders rushed him. But the soldier moved like a storm. His blade cut through the first attacker in one swift strike. He kicked another back, sending him crashing into the snow. He fought with a strength and fury that left the raiders stumbling. Each time one came close to the widow's shelter, the soldier blocked their path, his body a shield. Inside, the children clung tighter to their mother, their wide eyes fixed on the cracks in the wall. Her son whispered, "Mama, he's fighting for us." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to say he fought only because he was human, because he wanted to prove something. But the truth was clear. Every strike, every step he took was to keep them safe. More raiders poured in, shouting and swinging weapons. The soldier gritted his teeth, his body bleeding from cuts, but he did not fall. He planted himself firmly before the shelter, roaring with defiance. "You will not have them." The widow's tears fell hot on her cheeks. Her heart ached as she pressed her hands over her children's ears, trying to block the sounds of battle. But still, she heard the clash of steel, the cries of pain, the thud of bodies falling into the snow. The fight dragged on, and the widow feared he would not survive. She whispered desperately, "Please, don't die. Please, don't leave us like he did." Her memories of her husband's last battle flooded back, and pain squeezed her chest until she could barely breathe. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the door. A raider had slipped past, slamming into the shelter. The widow gasped, clutching her children behind her. The door splintered, and a man burst inside, his eyes wild, his blade raised. The widow screamed, shielding her children with her body. But before the raider could strike, the soldier crashed into him, dragging him back into the snow. His blade shone, and with one final strike, the raider fell. Blood stained the white ground. The soldier staggered, his chest heaving, his arm dripping with blood. The widow rushed forward without thinking, pulling him inside and slamming the door shut. Her hands shook as she pressed a cloth against his wound. Her children cried, holding tightly to his leg as if he were their lifeline. "Why?" she whispered through her tears. "Why would you do this for us? You could have run. You could have saved yourself." He looked at her, his eyes soft despite the blood on his face. "Because you are not alone anymore. Not while I breathe." Her tears fell faster, her heart breaking open. For years, she had lived in silence, carrying shame, fear, and hopelessness. But this man, This stranger stood bleeding for her and her children as if they were his own. The raiders' shouts grew fainter as other villagers finally rose to fight back, inspired by his defiance. One by one, the attackers fled into the darkness, leaving behind their dead. The village burned, but the widow's shelter stood untouched, guarded by the man who refused to let them fall. The children clung to him, sobbing, calling him Papa over and over. The widow could no longer silence them. She could no longer silence herself. Her voice shook as she whispered, "You are not just saving us. You are part of us now." The soldier, exhausted and bleeding, leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. But even in his weakness, his hand reached out and rested on the children's shoulders. A small, tired smile curved his lips. The widow pressed her forehead against his arm, her heart breaking and healing all at once. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. He was not just a protector. He was the father her children had prayed for, the strength she had lost, the hope she thought was dead. And as the night passed, filled with the smell of smoke and the cries of the wounded, the widow knew one truth above all. Her life was no longer cursed. It had been remade, not by her people, not by fate, but by a human who chose to stand and fight for her family when no one else would. The night after the raid was quiet, almost too quiet. Smoke still rose from burnt houses. The ground was stained with blood, and the air smelled of ash and sorrow. The widow sat inside her small shelter with her children asleep beside her. But she could not sleep. Her eyes kept wandering to the soldier, who leaned against the wall with his wounds wrapped in cloth. His chest rose and fell heavily, but he was alive. And he was alive because he had refused to let them die. She watched him in silence, her heart torn open. For years, she had buried her feelings, hiding behind shame and fear. But tonight, she could not hide anymore. She remembered the moment he had stood in front of the raiders, shielding her children with his own body. She remembered how her son had cried Papa, and how her daughter had clung to him like he was the only safe place in the world. In truth, he had become what no one else dared to be for them. When the morning came, the village gathered in the square. Many houses had been destroyed, many lives lost. The survivors whispered about what had happened, about the human who had stood against the raiders alone. Some spoke with anger, ashamed that a stranger had fought while they had hidden. Others spoke with respect, their voices low but filled with awe. The widow walked into the square, her children holding her hands tightly. The soldier walked beside her, his wounds slowing his steps but not his pride. The people stared as they approached. Whispers spread quickly. There she is, the widow. She hides behind the human. No, look, he saved her. He saved all of us. The widow's heart pounded. She wanted to turn back, to run, but the soldier's steady presence beside her kept her feet moving. When they reached the center of the square, the village leader stepped forward. His face was grim, his voice heavy. "You have broken our customs," he told her coldly. "You live with a human. You let your children call him father. This is not our way." The widow trembled, but before she could speak, the soldier stepped forward. His voice rang across the square like thunder. "Your way is broken. Your way lets widows starve and children freeze. If your law demands cruelty, then your law is worth nothing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one had ever dared to speak so boldly. The leader's face darkened, but the soldier did not stop. He pointed to the people gathered around. "When the raiders came, where were you? Hiding in your homes. I fought for this village while you cowered. If you call me unworthy, then you are blind. And if you call this family cursed, then you are cowards." The widow's breath caught. She had never seen such fire in anyone's eyes. His words burned through the shame that had chained her for so long. Her children pressed closer to her, their little hands clutching hers, their eyes shining with pride. The leader opened his mouth to reply, but something unexpected happened. An old woman in the crowd stepped forward, leaning on her cane. Her voice was shaky, but clear. "He speaks the truth. I saw him fight. If not for him, we would all be dead. Shame does not follow this widow. Honor does." Another voice joined her, then another. Slowly, the whispers of the crowd turned into murmurs of agreement. The people who had once spat on her now looked at her with new eyes. Not all of them, but enough. The widow felt her heart racing. She looked at the soldier, and in that moment, she made her choice. She stepped forward, her voice steady though her body trembled. "I am no longer ashamed. This man is my children's father, and if you call that a crime, then punish me. But I will not turn away from the one who saved us." Her words fell into silence. The crowd stared. The leader clenched his fists, but he could not answer. He had seen the same truth as everyone else. The human had fought when no one else had. To punish him now would only make the village look weaker. The soldier turned to her slowly, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, she did not look away. She saw the scars on his face, the weariness in his eyes, and the strength that had carried them through despair. And she saw something else, something she had not let herself see before. Belonging. Her son stepped forward suddenly, his voice loud and clear. "He is my father." The crowd gasped again. The little boy stood tall, his small fists clenched. "He feeds us. He keeps us warm. He fights for us. If that is not a father, then what is?" The widow's daughter, shy and small, slipped her hand into the soldier's and whispered softly, "Papa." The widow's throat closed. Tears blurred her eyes, but she let them fall freely. Slowly, she moved to stand beside the soldier, her hand brushing against his arm. Her voice was quiet, but strong enough for all to hear. "We had no future, but he gave us one. From this day, he is my husband." The square fell silent. Then, slowly, voices rose again, not in anger this time, but in respect. Some still frowned, but others nodded, their eyes filled with something she had not seen in years. Acceptance. The soldier said nothing. He only looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, followed by a warmth she had never seen before. His hand moved to rest gently on her shoulder. It was not a claim, not a demand. It was a promise. That night, when they returned to their shelter, the widow watched her children sleep peacefully between them. The fire glowed softly, wrapping them in warmth. She turned to the soldier, her heart finally free of chains. "You are not just their father now," she whispered. "You are mine too." The soldier looked at her for a long time, then gave a small nod. No grand words, no dramatic vows, just the steady truth of a man who had chosen them and who would never walk away. And so, in a world that had once given her nothing but sorrow, the widow found her future in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a human who had become the heart of her family.